Top 10 Biodiversity Topics for an Essay. Threat to biodiversity as a major environmental issue. Climate change has been recognized as a global problem requiring a global solution. Its negative environmental impact has become a reality for all of us. However, the threats to biodiversity, essentially intertwined with climate change issues, continue to be ignored despite being equally important. In your paper, you can argue that, given the importance of biodiversity to the existence of humanity, it makes sense to make efforts to protect it. Ecosystems, biodiversity, and habitat loss. Recently, biodiversity has faced significant threats due to habitat loss. The latter occurs when the natural habitats of species are destroyed or degraded, leading to the extinction of many species. You may want to focus on one or more factors contributing to habitat loss in your paper. Some of them are urbanization, deforestation, pollution, and climate change. Biodiversity and business risk. The loss of biodiversity interrupts businesses in several ways. Some of them are reduced productivity, increased resource costs, restricted land access, litigation, and reputation risk. Industries like forestry, farming, fishing, and extractives are directly impacted by the loss of biodiversity. In your paper, you could either elaborate on the types of risks businesses face due to the phenomenon or focus on a specific industry. Human health and biodiversity. Biodiversity is essential for the survival of many living organisms on Earth. The disruption of ecosystems leads to many changes, some of which may contribute to human health. The spread of infectious diseases is sensitive to changes in biodiversity. Another less obvious fact is that human health depends on ecosystem products and services such as fresh water and food. In your essay, you can consider both the direct and indirect impacts of biodiversity on human health. Marine biodiversity conservation. The problem of biodiversity conservation has long been on the agenda due to the ongoing destructive impact of industry on the environment. One of the most critical issues is marine biodiversity. The rate of ocean biodiversity is rapidly declining, and if adequate measures are not taken to address this problem, an ecological catastrophe is inevitable. In your essay, you can address the importance of marine biodiversity preservation. Evolutionary and genetic causes of biodiversity. Evolutionary change is based on the doctrine of natural selection, which we called life's unifying brainchild. Natural selection is hinged on the hypothesis that offspring inherit their characteristics from their parents through genes and that members of any particular population must have some inconsiderable disparity between them. In your paper, you can focus on these or other evolutionary and genetic causes of biodiversity. Defining and measuring biodiversity. Biodiversity is the variety of life forms, such as plants, animals, and microorganisms, and their interactions. In your paper, you can focus on one or several indicators used to measure biodiversity. Some of them are species diversity, genetic diversity, ecosystem diversity, and functional diversity. Loss of biodiversity in the Amazon ecosystem. In your paper, you should focus on the consequences that the loss of biodiversity has on the ecosystem of the Amazon. One of the most challenging issues is the economic cost of losing biodiversity in the region. The growth of the human population and the expansion of global economies have contributed to the significant loss of biodiversity despite the initial belief that increased resources can halt the adverse consequences of the decreased quality of ecosystems. Biodiversity and food production. In a paper on this topic, you should focus on the detrimental impact of biodiversity loss on food production. Human food is derived from other living beings. Hence, their greater variety ensures adequate nutrition. Birds and insects pollinate crops. Birds and insect pollinators are critical to the reproduction of seed plants. Some insects and birds feed on pests, thereby increasing productivity. These are just some examples. Wild crops and biodiversity threats. Agricultural diversity is an exciting topic to focus on in an essay. For centuries, the availability of millions of wild crop cultures contributed to the development of domesticated crops that have now become a source of nutrition. However, out of millions of existing types of wild crop cultures, the vast majority have been abandoned and eradicated, as the agricultural companies placed significant emphasis on the breeding of domesticated cultures.